Welcome to the show. IB Nation Sports Talk up and rolling on a Tuesday. We've got a lot going on today's show. Ryan Roberts is going to be along in a little bit. We'll talk a little Notre Dame football recruiting news specific to the quarterbacks, but Jesse will be along after that for rapid fire. But first, we're going to talk a little USC football. And, we've always got guys complaining you don't have live guests, so the guests are always recorded. Well, today we've got a live guest, and he's a hot one. It's RJ Abeytia, straight from the West Coast. How's it going, RJ?
It's going great. It's always funny how in a rivalry situation you always know what's going on with your team, but it seems like you also always know what's going on with that rival. So it's always fun for us kind of as diplomats to.
That's right. We're the intermediaries, right?
A lot less diplomatic in the fan base, but yeah, no, it's interesting. It's a fascinating time in college football for everybody, and obviously,
no kidding,
that always includes USC.
No kidding. That's exactly right, and that's kind of I told you last week when I texted you to see if you wanted to come on. That's kind of what sparked this whole thing with all the Cowherd stuff toward the end of last week, and whether or not Notre Dame-USC should continue forward. I think from a Notre Dame perspective, there's every reason to want this series to go forward. What about the USC side of things? Because obviously, the Trojans are going to the Big Ten, and that is going to change their schedule drastically. Like from the USC perspective, do you think USC wants to see this continue to go forward, I guess?
I think they do. I mean, you and I go way back. And so that, when I covered Stanford, this topic came up.
Right.
And certainly now it's amplified even more because this is the biggest intersectional game in the country, in the history of the sport. It's prime viewing. It's one of those games that, yeah, you always love to see them both be as good as possible, but it's also kind of immune to records. I feel like there are Notre Dame and USC fans who simply will not miss this game. And there are also national fans who won't miss the game, without those kind of ties. And so, forget the sentiment for a second. I mean, let's just speak plainly here. The Notre Dame schedule is the most valuable real estate in college football. It just is. And so if you have a spot on that schedule, why would you give that up? What are you going to swap that out for that's going to bring you better short or long-term value? And I think it's important to remember that, USC, and I think they rightfully so take a lot of pride in this. They've never scheduled an FCS team. And I think they might be the last team left.
They are, because Notre Dame went and did it last year when they scheduled Tennessee State. Notre Dame and USC were the last two holdouts in that department.
So, so historically, they're not going in for that SEC mode of like, let's just serve up as many cupcakes as possible in the non-conference. And also, they don't have to be that concerned, to be honest with you, with the 12-team playoff, right? Like, when it was 4, I think the argument becomes a tactical one, right? Like whether you're USC or Notre Dame, you're playing a really good team voluntarily.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
So you have to have some really good teams on your schedule. But if you're USC in now the Big Ten, it would be like, okay, well, now you've got a 10th really good team, and this season are potentially an 11th really good team on the schedule, right? Because you're opening with LSU. But to me, it is always a good thing to be playing Notre Dame. It is always good for everybody if USC plays Notre Dame. And like I said, from both a emotional fan of the game viewpoint, but I just think also tactically, how is it bad to have Notre Dame on your schedule? I guess is where I come out on it.
Well, I mean, it seems like, piggybacking on what you're saying, it's just, for the bottom line, it's nothing but good for both sides.
Right.
Right.
I mean, yeah, absolutely. And again, that's the thing, is that it's not either or. It's not this thing where you have to decide between the bottom line and sentiment. This is one of the rare times in sports and college football where the dollars, the cold-blooded assessment of it aligns perfectly with the emotional assessment of it. Who wants to see this rivalry end? Why? What does anybody gain from losing that? And who, like I said, I'll ask the question again. Who do Notre Dame and USC replace that provides a better experience or is a better situation? I just don't think there is one.
Well, and Andrew just brought this up, and he says he agrees with what Cowherd said. If your Big Ten rivals aren't playing anyone in the non-conference, why risk it? And there's an argument to be made for that, but at the same time, with all of this conference realignment and shifting, USC and UCLA are obviously partners coming into this together from that perspective. But so many rivalries are dying in college football,
right.
And it's part of what makes college football great. And when you have both a rivalry and again, it's not like this is a game that doesn't do both sides good from a dollars and cents standpoint. Why is USC going to the Big Ten? Because it makes sense from the bottom line. And Notre Dame USC is just good business, it seems like.
It is. And look, Andrew, like we said, like we both just kind of said, if there's an argument for moving away from one another, it would sort of be the tactical argument, right? But I think there's a couple things that mitigate that. I think number one, again, it's a 12-team playoff, right? So it's not we're not going to have, the debate about team 13 getting out, to me, is not going to be nearly as compelling as debate about teams 5, 6, 7, right, being omitted. So you have some room, number one. Number two, Notre Dame cannot keep USC from winning the Big Ten.
Yeah, exactly. And that's just like when Notre Dame plays anybody, whoever plays Notre Dame, they can still win their conference,
right,
and get an automatic bid into the playoff. Yeah.
So directly they can't have an effect. It's even more so this year, right? Because this year is they play at the end of the year. So USC's Big Ten fate will be decided before they play Notre Dame. And the other thing I would argue too, if you want to get into the tactical thing about it, like if you're a USC team and you are 11-1 and your loss is to Notre Dame, aren't you going to get some serious consideration? Presuming a good Notre Dame team, aren't you going to get some serious consideration over the cupcake walkers who maybe skate to an equal or better record, but they've got 3 massive cupcakes on their schedule? Like I think there's a world where a close loss to Notre Dame has more value than a win against a cupcake. And so you add all of that together, and I think I understand the thought process. I can see it, if Colin Cowherd's making that argument based on what the other Big Ten teams are doing. To me, this gives USC a leg up on the other Big Ten teams.
Yeah, but there are plenty of other Big Ten teams who still want to play Notre Dame when the opportunity comes up as well. Purdue, Michigan State, Michigan, they're all going to be on future schedules here over the next several years.
Right? Like you'd have to apply that argument to every Big Ten team. And I don't think there's anything close to a consensus. I think every Big Ten team, like every other team, would love to be on Notre Dame's schedule. And vice versa. I think Notre Dame has no problems showing up on USC's schedule. It's good for them as well.
Right. As a guy who's, has the Stanford connection as well, as you mentioned, is what's this period like, thinking about Stanford and Cal are going to be playing in the ACC here in a couple months?
Well, it's and we don't need to waste too much time on this because
we don't. But I just thought I'd throw it because you have a unique perspective on that.
I'll just say that Stanford has to acknowledge the crossroads that it's at, and this is a unique situation because it's time sensitive. First of all, I happen to believe that the ACC is going to be done in a year, at least in the way that we know it. So Stanford is very likely going to be looking for another home a year from now. But secondly, we're at a moment in the sport where schools need to seriously decide how important football is and how important the revenue sports are, because
Yeah.
we are moving towards a place where if you don't commit to being good, you're going to get left behind. We're going to have a tiered reality in college football and college basketball. And this isn't going to be a thing where it's like, you know, I'll just finish it up this way. What historically has happened with Stanford is they are the slowest and last person to the party when big change happens, when things have to happen, right? And historically, in a sense, that's fine, right? If you want to struggle for 3, 4, 5 years before you figure out the transfer thing, or you figure out early enrollees, or you figure out, you know, summer official visits, or anything, the transfer portal, NIL, historically, that's on you. Then it took you 5 years to get there, right? But this is not a moment where you have that kind of luxury. This is a moment where if you don't figure it out and you're not good, you're not going to be at the big kids table. And so it's I just speaking just from a Stanford perspective, this is a very shaky, very concerning time, because we've seen Stanford compete at a high level in football. Years ago, we saw it happen in men's basketball, so it's not like it can't happen. But we're getting to a point where if Stanford doesn't get it together, it won't happen.
Yeah, exactly. All right. I've only got you for a limited amount of time, so I want to make sure and talk, get more USC in here.
Let's go Cardinal and gold here.
Tell me Lincoln Riley as he stands. Obviously, there was regression from year one to year two. Are there almost, are there more questions maybe now going into year three than even year one for him? Like where does he, where's that all that stand right now?
Well, the funny thing is I don't think there are more questions. I don't think it's a quantity issue. I think bigger. It's actually been boiled down to one question. I think the whole thing, whether you're looking at it from a USC perspective or you're looking at it from the perception of Lincoln Riley and his legacy and where he stands as a coach and where he kind of is in his career, it's really simple. Can you put a functional defense on the field? That's it, really. I mean, I think, if you look at last season, it honestly wasn't that different in terms of the level of play of the season before. USC was an elite offense. 2 years ago, they were the best, but they were still a top 6, top 7 offense in the country. And no one is surprised at that. And everyone knows that Lincoln Riley is going to score points. They're going to score points this year. But they were horrific defensively. And the truth is, in the first year at USC with Lincoln Riley, the Trojans had a massive advantage in turnover ratio, like nation best, if I'm not mistaken. That means, number one, they never turned the ball over. But number two, their defense, the stops that their defense got were based usually on turnovers. And watching this game for as long as you've watched it, when that well dries up, you better be able to stop people. You better be able to get off the field on 3rd and 4th down, and they just weren't. And so without getting the turnovers, it kind of opened the floodgates even more. So it just comes down to, you talk about Lincoln Riley, he's got to put a good defense on the field. And this year, I think maybe there's a little runway in the sense of saying, at least can he put an improved defense on the field? So let's start there, because, even if they're mediocre in 2024, that would represent a massive improvement. So
sorry. Well, I was going to say they obviously, he addressed it in the offseason with a couple of interesting moves. I thought one, the biggest one was they go across town to UCLA. They bring in D'Anton Lynn as the defensive coordinator. They also, I thought an interesting move was their linebackers coach, Matt Entz, who is a former head coach at North Dakota State. So kind of seeing those guys operate during the spring, was there anything, tangible type improvement that you saw out of that defense in the spring?
I think there was. I think the biggest thing that we could pick up on was there was a legitimate shift in philosophy and a shift in mindset in terms of how you operate a football team and your priorities. D'Anton Lynn came in and made it very clear that spring football is about extremely slow pace and upload of information. Like, we are not going to throw 100 things at them. We are going to go at our pace. I'd rather have them figure out point 1, 2, and 3 and take all spring to do that than rush through points 1 through 10 and not be good at any of them. And that's not the way Lincoln Riley's used to running football teams or practices. And he was willing to change that this spring. He was willing to slow down. He made a point of it himself. He's like, we're going to go as slow as we need to. We're going to focus on getting this thing right. And you look at the coaches he brought in, and I think maybe the most important thing, and you talked about the Matt Entz thing, and I think it's a great example, is Lincoln Riley brought in coaches who can stand kind of on equal eye level with him and equal footing in a sense.
Interesting.
Right? And I think when you're talking about leadership, one of the big signs and one of the things that you see a lot in coaching in sports is when you have these coaches who are reluctant to bring in people who will sincerely challenge them, who will sincerely come with different ideas with conviction, right? And you want to see your leader not be threatened by that. And based on the people that Lincoln Riley brought in, he clearly wasn't threatened by it. He clearly wants the best ideas. It doesn't need to be his way or the highway. He wants a good defense. These are some really bright guys that he's brought in to figure this out. And so, we're going to have to see on the field because there's certainly some personnel issues that they're still wrestling with at the moment. But I do think it's reasonable to expect this is going to be a better defense. And I do think it's reasonable to expect it's certainly going to be a better coach defense.
Well, and beyond just, as you said, the defense being the biggest question, the defensive line and the offensive line seem to be, a couple of their biggest questions that they had probably going into spring. Are they any less a question, I guess, coming out of the spring as they go into the summer, obviously?
Well, I don't on the defensive line. It's really, again, if we're just doing triage, and there's only one thing that is concerning USC and concerning USC's fans at the moment, it's the defensive line, and it's the defensive line in between the tackles. They brought in Isaiah Rakes from Texas A&M, who was supposed to essentially be their starting, nose tackle, A-gap type guy. And they parted ways with him during the spring. So now you're talking about a defensive line room that is very short on players who have both the size and the experience that you need. They are starting to stockpile younger players. They're bringing in freshmen who kind of fit the profile of maybe the future A-gap guys, future interior defensive line contributors and stalwarts. But it's very hard, as you know, to throw line of scrimmage guys into the fire as freshmen. Mm-hmm. You are asking an awful lot, and you have to be an exceptional player. Even you can be a future star and still not be ready to play it as a freshman on the line of scrimmage, right? Absolutely. So they've got to find some answers there. They definitely do. I think, if the season were to begin today, I think there would be a lot of concern about the defensive line. On the offensive line, I think they are a player short in terms of the starters. I think they want someone they want a tweener. They want somebody who can push for the starting right guard spot. They've got a couple youngsters there who battled it out in the spring. And I don't think they're necessarily down on those two, but I also don't think they want to put all their eggs in those baskets. So I think in a perfect world, they find a veteran guy who can push to start at right guard, but can also slide out to right tackle if it's necessary. I think basically they're happy with 4 out of 5 spots on the offensive line, but they do want a little more insurance there at that right guard spot. So I think that's kind of where they are at the line of scrimmage right now.
So Caleb Williams obviously gone, and then we saw Miller Moss go off in that Holiday Bowl with his 6 touchdown passes against Louisville. Would you be shocked, I guess, if he's not the guy going into their opener against LSU?
Yeah, I mean, shocked as like shocked into a coma shock. Yeah, I mean, he's, Lincoln Riley wouldn't make any stone chiseled declarations, and he doesn't have to, so why would he? But he made it clear at the end of spring, with kind of the phrase I used already, if there was a game today, obviously Miller would be our starter. I don't expect any of that to change over the course of fall camp or the season. I think they have their starting quarterback. and he's really good. So I think it's going to be a very interesting season for them. But I think of the question marks on the team, I don't think quarterback is one at this point.
Andrew had another one about the quarterback. He said he's surprised that a major quarterback didn't want to transfer to USC, given the credentials of Lincoln Riley. What do you think about that?
Well, a major, depending on how you define major, a major quarterbacks did. And then the Holiday Bowl happened. And it became very clear that USC was not in a desperate, as you're saying, his situation isn't better. It became clear that USC's situation at quarterback was fine. Like, they have a starter. And so the recruiting intention and the recruiting direction shifted after the Holiday Bowl. USC was talking to a number of the high-profile quarterbacks in the transfer portal. And after the Holiday Bowl, that conversation shifted. And they went in a different direction, and they brought in kind of what they wanted, which was a young player who didn't have to start right away, but who had starting experience. And that's not an easy needle to thread there. But in Jaden Mayava, they got it. It wasn't planned for UNLV, but Doug Brumfield went down, and Jaden Mayava took the starting role and kind of ran with it. And then USC talked to him, he talked to them, and he felt like it was a great fit, and it was pretty clear. Obviously, and again, Lincoln Riley's going to say everyone's got to compete, everyone's got to earn it, so on and so forth. But it was pretty obvious that not being a presumed starter wasn't a deal breaker for Mayava. And I think it's safe to say the other names that USC was looking at, that certainly would have been a deal breaker. So, I guess I don't totally grant Andrew's premise on that. Their quarterback situation in the 2 deep is fine. I think when you talk about looking for a third and fourth guy, sure, it certainly could be better at this point. But I think as far as the 2 deep goes, I think they're feeling pretty good about the quarterback spot.
How are they, and I've kind of looked at the overall recruiting rankings. I haven't looked specifically at positions and who they're getting and those kind of things. Again, he's going into year 3 now. Recruiting that position specifically, are they where they want to be? Are they still kind of looking, I guess, right now, trying to kind of upgrade?
Well, they've got Julian Lewis committed. He's a 5-star in the 25 class. They didn't bring in a 24. And so, the challenge, of course, is you celebrate the day that a 5-star commits, but then you realize now from that date forward, you've got to hold everyone
on. Fight to keep him. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, there's been a lot of smoke that certainly there are other suitors for him at this point. And the tough spot that creates is that you're certainly not going to have wandering eyes with a 5-star commit, right? There's only a certain amount. You don't want to do that, right? But on the other end of it, it's become protocol for commits, especially elite commits, to take officials.
Right.
Post commitment, that it's kind of understood in college football that the recruitment's not over, and no toes are being stepped on. And look, USC is more than happy to flip players as well. Let's not pretend that they're not going after committed players, right? So, again, it's kind of the depth thing, right? Where if you have Julian Lewis coming in, I think a year from now you're probably feeling really good about your quarterback situation. But the depth thing, it's shaky, because if he were to decommit, if they were to lose him, now you're talking about having to go in on quarterbacks who may be elite, but are either already committed or are so far down the road with other schools in their recruitment that it's tough. It's tough to show up a year or 2 years into a guy's recruitment and try to pretend that you love him, right?
Right.
Because they're just going to say, well, where have you been for 2 years? So they need to close on Julian Lewis. But I think, overall, I think they like where they are. And again, like you said, it's Lincoln Riley. He will find a player to play quarterback.
Of all things, that it feels like that's a strength for Lincoln Riley, right?
There will always be a line of guys who are ready to take that phone call.
Right.
So
he needs to have himself Heisman rings made, I think, so he can just go out and flash his Heisman rings for every recruit, quarterback recruit when he drops in.
I mean, for all the heat that he takes about the other side of the ball, and it's understandable. I do think when you look at the history of college football, for a guy to have stacked up this kind of resume, and you think of the brilliant quarterback developing minds in the history of the sport, and he's lapped them already. This is a guy who hasn't even been coaching for 10 years as a head coach. It's impressive. It's impressive what he's done, and it's impressive what he does with quarterbacks. I don't think there's any question about that.
RJ Abeytia, our old buddy who covers USC for the 24/7 site, uscfootball.com. It's a fairly easy one to remember if you're out there. You want some USC information, uscfootball.com. Appreciate it as always, RJ. It's great to talk to you.
Thanks for having me, Sean. Anytime.
Yep, absolutely. All right. RJ Abeytia, and we will go right from him into there he is, flashing him. Ryan Roberts, our recruiting analyst. I'm curious because, what brought you on here to talk about quarterbacks today. Maybe some of your thoughts kind of hearing the tail end of that with RJ talking about Lincoln Riley and quarterback recruiting and the lot.
I think that's the reverse side of the conversation we keep having, Sean, right? It's like Notre Dame's recruiting quarterback at a very high level over the last couple of years, but they're kind of doing it without results being behind them, right? But like USC is the complete opposite. I mean, if you're Lincoln Riley, you could just go, did you see what I did with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray and Caleb Williams and all these future first round draft picks, Heisman Trophy winners? So that's where you want Notre Dame to get to, though, man. You don't want it to be the defensive conversation that has plagued Lincoln Riley over the last few years, but you want it to be the offensive quarterback situation where you're just flashing that hardware, like you were saying. So, yeah, it's the reverse of the conversation that we typically have on this channel.
Well, I mean, I think definitely Notre Dame fans found a different appreciation for Al Golden after last season. But, I think maybe that appreciation should be even greater when you look at Notre Dame's results versus the horrendous defense that USC put on the field last season.
Well, a good thing is that finally, and we'll see how the results follow this, but Lincoln Riley finally made a defensive decision this past offseason that should be the betterment of their program moving forward. For whatever reason, he was stuck with the previous defensive coordinator who was terrible, right? Like he literally one good year at Washington State parlayed that into him being a defensive coordinator at Oklahoma and then USC, but was never good, Sean. Like he was never good. Right. So this offseason finally cut the ties. You go out and get D'Anton Lynn, who I think is a really good young defensive coordinator who did a tremendous job with UCLA last year. So if Lincoln Riley if he's proud enough to say, you know what, that wasn't working what I was doing before, and he upgrades the defensive side of the football, then USC will be a good team on a year-to-year basis. If not, they're going to have those clunk 7-5 seasons occasionally they just had this past year.
So let's shift it into Notre Dame gear here, talking about some quarterbacks. Of course, they get the commitment of Noah Grubbs over the weekend at Irish Invasion. And I saw some of the video on social media. I'm curious, like as the recruiting guy, it's got to be pretty cool when you see Deuce Knight and Noah Grubbs tossing the ball back and forth at a Notre Dame camp over the weekend.
I mean, it's so cool, Sean, because it's going to be like a large part of the conversation we have. It's just, it looks different now, doesn't it? I mean, you're watching one 6'4.5" talented quarterback throw to another 6'4.5" talented quarterback. Like this is very new. This is a new venture in Notre Dame land, man. It really is. So yeah, seeing that. And then also right next to him, a 2027 quarterback in Trey Taylor, who is an Illinois kid that's pretty dang good as well. So like the crop of quarterbacks that was there this past weekend, man, there's a lot of talents, but yes, seeing Grubs, seeing Deuce Knight, but more importantly, seeing both those players that look the parts, right? That's one thing that over the last few years before Marcus Freeman became the head coach, that was one thing that was troubling, right? Like Ian Book, for as many good things as he did, when it happened in the biggest game, you saw the limitations, you saw the flaws. The flaws are not going to be quite much there with a guy that is 6'4.5" and Deuce Knight, who runs in the 4.5s and has a 40+ inch vert, or Noah Grubbs with the powerful right arm that he has. I mean, you are trying to make it how I always thought of it this way. I don't know if you agree with this, Sean, but like how Notre Dame has played in the past was you needed basically to play a clean game in order to win a football game. A lot of against a big opponents, right? Like a clean game. If you
Almost
struggle or you don't
game.
block well, and if you turn the ball over, like it's over. These types of talent at quarterback position, it widens the margin for error, man. You don't have to be perfect anymore because Deuce Knight can potentially go hero mode occasionally, right? CJ Carr can do some of that stuff. I mean, these quarterbacks have the talent now where you're like, it doesn't always have to be perfect, and it shouldn't always have to be perfect.
Ryan's got a piece, I should say, if it's not out yet, it'll be coming up at irishbreakdown.com pretty soon about, kind of some of this stuff that we're talking about. And it's when you look at these guys, you've mentioned just the size of these guys, and reading, you sent me your article, and I got to read through it a little bit, and I guess I never pieced it together. Like when you look at the quarterbacks Brian Kelly was recruiting versus these guys, and just the sheer size, is that specific intent as Marcus Freeman has gone out and recruited, just the profile of the kind of quarterback that they're looking for?
I think it's intentional on both sides of the ball. I mean, like, obviously we're talking quarterback centric here, but Sean, why on defense was the big mission on the first and second level of the defensive line and linebacker? Why did Marcus Freeman immediately want to get longer and more rangy on the second level? Because again, widened your margin for error, man. You don't have to have a perfect read all the time with a Kingston Viliamoasa, with a Jaden Osbury, with a Drake Bowen. Like, you don't have to have a perfect read all the time. You don't have to have the greatest jump off the defensive line for a Boubacar Traore or an Armel Mukum or a Bryce Young. That they are eliminating and widening their margin for error, I think, is the biggest thing. That's why you're recruiting more length. That's why you're recruiting more explosiveness. That's why. And at quarterback, it's the same story, man. Again, and I want to phrase this the best way, because there are some players that are the anomalies, right? Like a Kyler Murray, for instance, is 5'10", and that dude has just a cannon for an arm. That doesn't make any sense because 5'10" quarterbacks don't usually have that strong of an arm.
Yeah, the tools that guy has for a 5'10" guy are just outstanding.
Are rare, right? Like that instance just doesn't happen much. It is much more likely as you get longer, more athletic everywhere, you have more opportunities to not only make more plays, but to lessen the stress on being perfect every single play, because it's impossible on any single level of football, especially college kids, man. We're talking about, and the COVID year is almost over. The 2025 NFL draft is the last year we have to worry about the COVID year, right? From the NFL draft side of things. Soon, we're going to be talking about 18 to 22 to 23-year-olds again, and not 24, 25-year-olds. Like, we're almost lessening that. Those kids are going to make mistakes, man. And you want to gamble on traits for kids that are occasionally going to make mistakes. Because I always used to tell players when I coached, I would rather you make a fast mistake than try to be perfect all the time, because you're still going to make a lot of plays. And that's
make it at 100 miles an hour. Yes.
Right. Deuce Knight, occasionally, I'm just going to use Deuce because he is the rarest athlete that Marcus Freeman has recruited at the quarterback position, Sean. At Notre Dame, he is going to make an occasional play that is completely off script, and you're like, that is not at all how that play was supposed to go. But you know what? You recruited an athlete that can make that type of play. You want to have that opportunity and to find players that can make the wrong play the right play occasionally. That's why you're trying to widen the gap right now.
So Grubs, from a Notre Dame perspective, the third straight quarterback that they've been able to get a commitment from, who is ranked in the top 60 overall by at least one of the recruiting platforms. Brian Kelly only had one quarterback who was ranked that high in his last 6 recruiting classes. And we kind of started. This is different for Marcus Freeman and Chad Bowden, than it is for a guy like Lincoln Riley, who's got that offensive, quarterback, 3 Heismans and the whole thing, in his back pocket. How have they been able to hit it so big, so quickly with these elite quarterbacks like this in succession?
Man, it's a great question. And yeah, man, that stat was just wild because I went through every quarterback basically since 2011 that Notre Dame has recruited, right? And you kind of looked at I looked at every ranking they had on every single platform that was available at that time. And I thought that was the craziest stat of all time. Like literally 2 out of the 3 straight years, top 60 overall. 2 of the last 3, they've had a top 50 overall quarterback by at least one single platform. Tyler Buckner was the only kid in the last 6 years that was true. Other than that, Phil Dracovic was the only other quarterback that is ranked in the top 100 by any platform at all. And then otherwise, I mean, there was, I think, 2 or 3 years kind of looking back at it where it was like Brendan Clark and Steve Angeli, who were ranked as actually, Brendan Clark wasn't even ranked as a 4-star by anybody. Steve Angeli was only ranked as a 4-star by one single platform. And then another year, you signed Avery Davis as your only quarterback, and he was only a 4-star by one platform the year that he came out as well. So when you look at how it's trending, Sean, it's almost wild to think about. And I look, why is this happening? One, I think that there is a vision that Marcus Freeman is selling, right? And I think a part of that vision is, hey, did you see who I just hired as my offensive coordinator? Like, that's pretty cool, right? Like, he's has a great track record, obviously. But I think most of it is you are grinding on the recruiting trail and you have a vision and you are relentless. And I think that they have widened their perspective on what can fit at Notre Dame at every single position. I think that matters to quarterback too. Think of the last 2, Sean. You have a public school kid from the state of Mississippi as your quarterback in the 2025 class. There's only been 2 players. Let's assume Deuce Knight signs with Notre Dame. That means that there will only be 2 players in 29 years that have signed with Notre Dame from the state of Mississippi. Not 2 quarterbacks from Mississippi, 2 overall players from the state of Mississippi, a public school kid. All due respect to Brian Kelly, this is speculation on my part, but I don't think he ever would even have recruited Deuce Knight because it was just so different. He was different. And I'm not even talking about like a skin complexion thing. I'm talking literally a public school kid from Mississippi. Like that's
just the whole profile. That's right.
Out of the realm. That's out of the scope, man. Like you just don't go down to Mississippi if you're Notre Dame. You don't go down to the public schools in Mississippi. You just don't do it. But Marcus Freeman widened the net, widened the scope, and said that kid can fit, man. Like he can fit. We'll make that happen. And now you're talking about Noah Grubbs, who was another public school kid from the state of Florida. Notre Dame has had struggles in Florida previously before Marcus Freeman came here over the last
Gave
couple
up
years.
on Florida under Brian Kelly. Yeah.
Really did. Just stopped the efforts. And Marcus Freeman came in and said, no, we're not ignoring one of the talent-rich states in the country from a recruiting perspective. We're going to tackle it. And first 2 commitments in the 2026 class, Florida kids. Look what they have done in 2025 with Florida, with Justin Thurman and Ivan Taylor and Dallas Golden, and tremendous efforts in the state of Florida. So again, Noah Grubbs is not your typical Notre Dame recruits. They don't go for public school quarterbacks in the state of Florida. Like that doesn't typically happen either, man. So I think again, Marcus Freeman is riddening the notion of that's what fits at Notre Dame. And in result, you have a top 40 overall quarterback by multiple platforms in CJ Carr. You have Deuce Knight, who's ranked in the 50s by 2 different platforms. And you have Noah Grubbs, who's ranked as a top 50 player, number 44 overall by Rivals in the 2026 class. Again, they are hitting a sequence of quarterback recruiting that we have not seen at Notre Dame in a very, very long time. They are changing a narrative.
So is Grubbs also, I think I might have heard you guys when I was listening to you over the weekend after the commitment, is he the earliest quarterback commitment they've had in quite some time?
In several years, at least, because I was thinking about it just since I've been covering recruiting, Sean. Like obviously Kenny Minchie in the 2023 class didn't commit until in the season, right, of his senior year. So that obviously not. CJ Carr was like a week after the Irish invasion. And then you had Deuce Knight, who was in September of his junior year, right? So, yeah, Noah Grubbs, at least in the last like 5 or 6 years, is the earliest quarterback that has ever committed. And he wanted to do that, right? It was intentional on his part. He told me this, as well as his quarterback trainer, Balin Trujillo, that Noah wanted to start the process early because he understands how important it is for a quarterback to be the face of a recruiting class and to be a main recruiter. So now he has a year and a half to help recruit this 2026 class, man. So yeah, he is as early as I Since I've been covering recruiting, he is the earliest Notre Dame quarterback commits, no doubt.
Are there any, I guess, specific guys maybe in that 26 class that Grubs can sort of go out and be a big help with right now?
Sean, let me ask you a question. Why should you be on the message board at boards.irishradio.com? It's because one of these names, Sean, you would literally know already. Okay. I dropped an intel piece the day of because I had a great conversation with a couple sources, including Balin Trujillo, just about things around Noah Grubbs and the end of the recruitment and all those miscellaneous things. One name he dropped to me. And he was okay with me putting out in the universe on the message board. And it's been on the message board for several days. So I'm sure someone's leaked it to other platforms because people unfortunately do that in message boards for whatever reason, right?
Right.
Georgia athlete Aaron Gregory, who is considered a top 30, top 35 player by 2 or 3 platforms at this point. 5-star level player, 6'2", 170 pounds, safety technically, but also can play wide receiver. He's one of those kids that you can just put him anywhere. Like you can put him at safety, you can put him at wide receiver, you can put him at rover. It doesn't matter, man. Just let the kid play. He could probably play corner if he felt like it. He's that dynamic of a player. Apparently, Noah and Aaron, despite one being from Florida and one being from Georgia, they work out together. And there's a relationship there. And that doesn't necessarily mean that Aaron Gregory is definitely going to pick Notre Dame. But it is saying, though, because he's a high GPA kid as well, high academic kid, Notre Dame's going to have a chance with Aaron Gregory, and a pretty good chance, I think. So Aaron Gregory, athletes 2026 class out of the state of Georgia, is one that I would definitely keep an eye on. And then other than that, like I had some guys written down that are obviously, when you're talking about a big-time Florida quarterback, it's going to attract other big-time Florida athletes, right? So
You hope.
I had like Javion Mallory, who's a running back who likes Notre Dame a good amount already, running back. There's a trio of wide receivers. You already have Dylan Faison, who's a Florida kid, but you have a trio of Florida wide receivers that has been offered by the program as well at this point. Jabari Brady, Naheem Burrows, and Zion Legree, who can also play safety and wide receiver as well, kind of a similar vein as Aaron Gregory. So I would keep a close eye on some of these skill position players. Is it going to help you in the class also with like Zach Fort, the safety out of IMG Academy? It's possible, but I really focused, and I'm going to put an article out on Gregory and then some of the skill position players from Florida, because I think that is going to be a point of emphasis. Obviously, getting a big time Florida quarterback, I think that there is going to be a heavy dose of the Sunshine States in the 2026 class for Notre Dame.
Good to hear. Yeah. I like to hear that. You want to take a shot at this? I have no idea. Tommy put this in here. TUSCARAWAS. What is the significance of whatever this word is?
There's no significance other than on every show now, every time I mispronounce a name of a state or street or school, everyone loses their mind for whatever reason. Sean, so there was NOVI, Michigan. Okay. NOVI. How would you pronounce that?
It's got to be either Novi or Novi. I mean, it's one.
And that's
of the
what
two,
I said.
Right?
I said Novi. Apparently, it's Novi. But then someone in the chat said it's Novi or something like that. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense, right? And it's become a running joke. Ryan can't pronounce things. Ha 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 ha. I'll do this for you though, Tommy. Tuscarawas.
Okay,
that's probably completely wrong. Tuscaris. I don't know. I give up. I don't care. Tommy, phonetically spelled in the chat, because I really don't care, to be honest. Don't care.
I would have no idea. Like Tuscarawas. I don't know. Like, I don't think I've ever seen that word before. To me, it looks like a conglomeration of letters just thrown together. So
sure. Let's go with that.
Why not?
Well, all we learned here tonight, Sean, outside of some recruiting stuff, I guess, is that Tommy Guns is a jerk. That's all we learned today.
I mean, don't we learn that every day? You know, when he's in the chat,
single day. I'm going to stop.
Isn't that the number one thing
now? Yeah,
that's right. That's exactly right. Is that an old school Phillies jersey, by the way?
It is. Got the Bryce Harbor throwback right there, man. I'm not down with the City Connect jersey. Do you like the Connect? I don't know. It's like
I would rather see old school than the City Connect. What do you think?
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm not a fan of it. I mean, like, it's okay. But when I first saw it, I'm just like, that doesn't scream Phillies to me, right? So like my traditionalist hat on, I guess. I'm just like, I don't really like that. I don't think I'm more of a traditional, like, I want this baby blue. I want that kind of flavor. That's more.
I agree. I think the Phillies, that Phillies baby blue throwback. I mean, like I'm old enough to remember, like when Pete Rose and Mike Schmidt, and Steve Carlton, and all those guys were wearing those blues in the World Series back in 1980.
As Jesse Stiers would say, the baby blue hits different, man. It's different.
Ole Miss baby blue, the Houston Oiler baby blue.
I'm not an Ole Miss guy, man, but the Ole Miss blue is nice. That's
Chargers
swaggy.
powder blue.
It does look good. Yep. Yeah. I like the Chargers powder. You know what's going to happen though? Is sooner or later the Chargers are probably going to come back around to wearing the navy blues instead. But I think those powder blues are way sharp.
It is. Is this a hot take? I don't know. That the throwback Chargers jersey is the best football jersey of all time.
Yeah,
especially when LaDainian Tomlinson was wearing it.
Oh, I'm sick with the visor, with the black visor.
Yeah,
sick, dude. Sick.
And the white helmet. I much prefer the white Chargers helmet to the blue Chargers helmet.
The white helmet's sick, man. That's good taste right there, Sean. That's pretty good for a Cowboys fan, man. That's not bad.
I don't even have any Cowboys gear on today. All right. Of course, you can always find Ryan's stuff, irishbreakdown.com, or the juicy stuff, as he was saying. Go to the Champions Lounge, the premium board. Pay that subscription. It is worth your while. Just
dropped some intel on 2025 linebacker Nathaniel Owusu-Boateng earlier. Just dropped another one on 2025 linebacker Madden Faramo, both of which that are visiting Notre Dame this weekend. So, yes, boards.irishbreakdown.com.
All right. Anthony says Tuscawaras. All right. Tuscawaras. I will have to believe him.
It's a dumb name. No offense to anybody out there. That's stupid. Stupid name.
Yes. I feel like we're racking our brains over something very insignificant right now. So.
Or don't insult Tommy like that. He's not just kidding.
I'm not saying Tommy's insignificant.
No, just kidding.
All right, good stuff as always, Ryan. Talk to you later.
See you, fellas.
All right.
See you, Ryan.
Good. Jesse is in the house. Jesse, are you ready for some rapid fire?
Well, that's what I'm here for.
That's exactly right. This is a fast-moving show with 3 different people in here with me today. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame adding Boise State today to its 2025 home football schedule. Is blank.
Is meh. Like if this were Boise State, 15 years ago, I think this would push the needle a little bit for me. But, Boise State, they're just an average program, right? And so, while it's fun to play a new opponent, this is the first time they've played each other. First time, obviously, Boise State is coming to Notre Dame Stadium. While I appreciate the diversity, I would just like to see maybe a little uptick in a program. Like Boise State really doesn't move it for me. I maybe at least a Power 5 program. I don't know.
This is a little bit outside the box, I think, for me. And for Jesse and I feel like you've been hanging out with Vince a little bit too long. I mean, are you just going to go to the dark side right away? I kind of like this. I mean, they've played they're 32-6 all time against the Mountain West Conference. So it's not like they've never played the Mountain West Conference before, but they've never played Boise State before. And this is going to be the 90th FBS program of 134 now that they have played. I'm thinking exactly what Anthony is saying here. I would take Boise State over literally any school in the MAC for Notre Dame to play. And especially when you look at the fact that there's 2 MAC schools coming to town this season. I like this. At least, like you said, it's not the Boise State of 15 years ago, but it's still, there's a lot more name recognition in terms of any of the group of 5 teams that you could play. I think that this is at the top of the pecking order in terms of group of 5. So I like this. I like it a lot, actually.
I like what a lot of people are
and stick it in a sack.
I like what other people are saying. I do believe it's an upgrade over a MAC school. So at least it's, better than Toledo or Miami of Ohio or Northern Illinois. Again, to me, when you're going to announce opponent like this, I anticipate it to be a bigger name, especially at home. I like Notre Dame to play big games at home, meaningful games at home.
Here's the home schedule next year now. You've got Texas A&M, Purdue, Boise State, USC, Navy, NC State, Syracuse. I think that's a lot better looking home schedule than what they've got this year.
Oh yeah, way better than this year. But I mean, I think a lot of that is carried by Texas A&M, USC, Syracuse,
NC State,
I guess.
I think Boise State, again, it's not Boise State from winning the Fiesta Bowl and, Statue of Liberty plays and proposals at the end of the game and all that stuff. But still,
Garrett Blunt punching someone.
There's at least a little name brand, I think, that goes along with Boise State. So I like it. David says that he is a Boise State alum, and he's glad that they're playing Notre Dame. He says he's been wanting this game so bad to shut people in Boise up. Go Irish. If I don't go to the game, I'll start a fund me for ball. Interesting. So he's a Boise State alum, but he's all in on Notre Dame. Okay. Yeah. NH, I agree. I think that's a pretty solid home schedule next year. I think it looks a lot better than, like you said, it's propped up by Texas A&M and by USC, but at the same time, it still looks better than this year. Fill in the blank. Manti Te'o is on the College Football Hall of Fame 2025 ballot. The on-field moment that stands out the most from his career is blank.
I would say the 2 interception game against Michigan. I would say the goal line stand against Stanford. And then I would say, I believe the interception against Oklahoma
to seal the Oklahoma. Yeah.
To seal the Oklahoma game. So those would be my top 3. I don't know if I can put those in order because I again, having, 2 interceptions against your rival and essentially, sealing that game was incredible. To beat Oklahoma on the road, a ranked opponent, a top 10 opponent, that was a huge win. And then obviously if you lose the Stanford game at that point in the season, you're probably no longer a national champion contender. But, ultimately the entire senior season was just so impressive. 7 interceptions, all of it. He had over 100 tackles. And to me, the extraordinary part of that is he had 0 interceptions in his career leading up to that season. And all of a sudden he just pooped out 7 of them. Like that's, I don't understand how you do that. Like defensive backs can't even do that, let alone, a linebacker. And it's like, so,
exactly.
While the tackles for loss and sacks were a little bit down compared to, the season before, I would trade that in terms of turnovers, right? Getting your offense the ball, points off turnovers, etc. So I really think of that Michigan 2 interception game.
Oh, so that's what it came back to. Interesting, because you just rattled off his entire season when I asked you for a moment. Is he basically stealing every moment that I might possibly be able to come up with? I go to the 2 interception game against Michigan as well. I mean, Denard Robinson was cooked in that game, man. Like he had nothing and nowhere to go. Remember, it was rain soaked, and he throws 4 interceptions in that game. And, his leading receiver had 3 receptions that day. Te'o had 2 interceptions. He threw almost as many to Manti Te'o as his own leading receiver had in that game. And of course, it launched him into the Heisman conversation and the whole thing. And like you said, 7 interceptions after having none before, and also over 100 tackles that season. And, one, remember, I'm glad that I specified on-field moment because obviously, DK's already making his reference to the other stuff that happened that season. But awesome season. I'll be curious to see if Manti gets in. I mean, to be a middle linebacker and to end up at the New York Athletic Club on Heisman, in December, Heisman Trophy finalist, finishing as the runner-up to Johnny Manziel. I don't think we're going to see too many middle linebackers ever make it as far as Manti did. And of course, he won basically every major award that he was up for that year, with the exception of the Heisman. I should also mention Todd Light on the ballot as well for College Football Hall of Fame. You're a little bit too young to remember his playing days. Like he was still playing for the Rams and winning a Super Bowl for the Rams when you were a young puck, but I doubt that you even remember that. But great career Todd Light had as well. So hopefully at least one of those guys gets in. Both very, very deserving. Let me ask you this, though. Of the current players on Notre Dame's roster, who do you give the best chance to be in the College Football Hall of Fame one day?
So I did a little extra credit. I did one offense and one defense. On offense, I'm just gonna have to say Charles Jagasaw because I'm a fan of repetition and pattern and what has Notre Dame been the best at producing as of recently. It's been offensive linemen. And so I believe that he's kind of the next one up. So I would go with Charles Jagasaw on offense. And then for defense is tough because they have a lot of guys. Like, I think you have to start young with these ones, right? Because, like I know Benjamin Morrison had a good first year, but I don't know if that translates into, College Football Hall of Fame. While Xavier Watts did have one good season, I guess what I'm saying is one good season doesn't get you in the College Football Hall of Fame. So it's really hard.
Right.
It's really hard to say some of these older upperclassmen are going to get there because I think ultimately their time has really passed them. So I'm going to go with Drake Bowen as my other one because I think you have to go with someone who has a long career ahead of them. And I think Drake Bowen, if he does well this year, could be a starter for 3, potentially 4 years. So those are my two.
Right. And I should say the first requirement and the main requirement to get on the College Football Hall of Fame ballot is you have to have been a first-team All-American by, one of the selectors. And, that ultimately comprises the consensus All-American team. So you have to be at least a first-team All-American, which Xavier Watts would qualify for. And, he was a unanimous All-American last year. So he definitely has a leg up on anybody as of right now. I'm going to go like you're going with unproven talent, basically. And you're going with Jagasaw based on the track record the left tackle has. And I mean, that's not a bad way to go. I think you play your odds by doing it that way. Like Joe Alt was just a first team All-American. Well, he ended up in the College Football Hall of Fame, like as a starting point right there. I'm going to go with CJ Carr, though. I just, I think that we're all very excited about the career this guy is going to have. And I guess based on, again, like if you look at Notre Dame track records, the odds are against him, to end up with that first team All-American status, just based on history at Notre Dame. But we all think that this is a guy who is ultimately going to break the mold and just based on the micro results that we've seen from him in a spring game and over the course of his first spring practice, it's sure pretty promising. So I'll slide my chips to the CJ Carr side of the table. Xavier Watts, if he has anything close to the kind of season that he put up last year, this upcoming season, like if I'm going scale out of 1 to 10, I would slide him up probably to an 8.5 range. That in terms of his chances to ultimately end up in the College Football Hall of Fame. But I'm gonna go CJ Carr with all the upside that he's got.
Nice. I like that we had differing selections.
Yes. Benjamin Morrison is an interesting one, but again, you've got to be a first team All-American. So we all know how really good he is. Part of that comes with, so much of it is sort of, reputation, that you have developed. He's going into his junior season now after he was a freshman All-American a couple of years ago. Opportunities have so much to do with it as well. Is he going to have opportunities to make plays? I think that's the biggest thing for him. Like, can he rattle off some highlight reel type stuff? He's had a great career so far, and coming into his junior season now, a chance to kind of put a capper on that. Switch to the other Hall of Fame, the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I'm curious, how many current NFL quarterbacks do you think are going to end up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame?
This is tough. I say a comfortable answer is 3. A maximum answer is 5.
So let's go through it here. Patrick Mahomes, a definite, right?
Yes. That's
Aaron
one
Rodgers.
of my yes.
Yep. Go ahead.
So I have Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers as like my 2 for sure. And I think Lamar Jackson ends up in the Hall of Fame as a 3rd. Those are like the ones I feel the most confident about. And then from there, I would probably say Russell Wilson and then either Josh Allen or Matt Stafford. But I don't think it's going to be Stafford. I would say Russell Wilson and Josh Allen are kind of my like next 2 maybe.
Joe Burrow? Where are you on Joe Burrow?
No, I don't think he's going to stay healthy long enough.
See, I've got Joe Burrow ahead of Josh Allen myself. Like, you can't lose that many AFC championship games.
Yeah, but look who you're losing to.
No, I know. But is he ever going to even get to a Super Bowl? That's the biggest thing, I think, that stands in Josh Allen's way, because Hall of Fame for the quarterback position, Hall of Fame and winning a Super Bowl are like they almost go hand in hand. You have to be so great and put up such big numbers, like a Dan Marino type guy, obviously, to get in the Hall of Fame without winning a Super Bowl. I think Matt Stafford is in, especially when you consider that he played the majority of his career on so many bad teams in Detroit and never had the opportunity. And then he finally goes to the Rams in that trade and gets the Super Bowl. Lamar Jackson's going to be an interesting one. He's got to win a Super Bowl to get in, because I think of him the way you're talking about Joe Burrow. Can he stay healthy over the course of his career, the way he plays? I think he's got to win a Super Bowl relatively soon if he's ever going to have a chance.
Yeah, but the thing he's got on Joe Burrow, obviously he doesn't have the Super Bowls yet. He's already got 2 MVPs.
True. That's a leg up, but you're going to have to keep locking those up if you're not going to even get to the Super Bowl, let alone win a Super Bowl. I think that's going to be the biggest thing for him, but I think those MVPs will help. By the way, with Tom Brady retired, Patrick Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Matt Stafford, Russell Wilson, and one other quarterback are the only active Super Bowl winning quarterbacks. Do you know who the other one is?
Say the ones who do have it first.
Mahomes, Rodgers, Stafford, Russell Wilson, and then one other guy.
Don't tell me.
I won't. Don't look at the chat. Don't cheat. See if anybody gets it.
One more quarterback. I don't know. Who is it?
Joe Flacco. Andrew got it.
Is he still current, though? Is he on a roster this year?
Now, Nick Foles. I forgot about Nick Foles. Because I don't even know if Nick Foles is on a roster right now. That's why I forgot about him. But that's a great one, Ghost Deck. So there are actually 2 other. I assume Nick Foles, can't remember, did he finish the season with the Colts last year? I'm not even sure where Nick Foles was. Let me look this up here real quick. He was with the Colts last year. He is currently a free agent. So technically I was not wrong by not including him on that list. I'm sure he'll be someplace, but that's crazy. Russell Wilson was obviously on a Hall of Fame trajectory. And I have heard, after the whole move to Pittsburgh and the whole thing this offseason, I heard him still referred to as a future Hall of Famer. Do you think that he is a lock for the Hall of Fame? Like if his career ended today, is he a lock for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, Russell Wilson?
I think you could have an entire debate about this question. I think that the only thing that holds Russell Wilson back is he doesn't have an MVP. While he does have a Super Bowl, and he probably, you could say he should have a second Super Bowl. His numbers do actually stack up well all time, But again, the no MVP is the part that really throws me.
And no MVP votes, I believe.
And so even in his best seasons, he's not considered, the best overall quarterback in the entire league. So for that reason, I'm going to have to say no.
I think he's on the bubble. I think he's going to ride it for a while to see if he is able to get in. I think it's going to take a little bit. And I think he's got more to prove. Like if he is able to do something in Pittsburgh within the next 3 years, and I'm talking about even get to a Super Bowl, that could sway me greatly, considering, again, how stacked the AFC is with all the great quarterbacks and Patrick Mahomes, along with including Patrick Mahomes. Like, if he even gets to a Super Bowl where he is in the AFC, that would be saying something. So I think that as of right now, he is not. I think he's still got work that he's got to do. So I heard Brian talk about this in one of his shows. I listened to this show yesterday, and I think he and Ryan published it over the weekend. In the 2018 college football playoffs, the 4 quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Tua Tagovailoa, Ian Book. In 2020, the 4 quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Mac Jones, Justin Fields, Ian Book. So from a Notre Dame perspective, what does this say to you?
What this says to me is that Notre Dame essentially kind of outperformed their ceiling at the quarterback, because I think that those 3 quarterbacks in each playoff scenario were much better quarterbacks than Ian Book. And you can say, while Mac Jones had better talent around him, I think he ended up having at least a better shot at NFL career than Ian Book. We know Trevor Lawrence did. We know Kyler Murray did. Who else did you name on that list? Tua, we know that he's having a better NFL career. And while it didn't work out for Mac Jones and Justin Fields, I do believe that they are a more talented quarterback than what Ian Book ultimately was. And so for me, again, that shows that Notre Dame kind of outperformed their ceiling that season, really on the offense. And it ultimately kind of showed in those games, right? Because Ian Book wasn't enough as a difference maker.
Yeah, that's exactly it. What you finished with is the biggest thing. And that's what we were talking about earlier in this show with Ryan, the recruiting at the quarterback position and how important it is. Because look at all of those guys, every one of them. Trevor Lawrence, Kyler Murray, Tua, Justin Fields, and Mac Jones. All of those guys, first-round NFL draft picks. And if Notre Dame is even close at the quarterback position to the kind of play that those teams got from their quarterbacks in those specific seasons, it's a lot different result for Notre Dame. And instead, they were lopsided losses for Notre Dame. And that's why where Notre Dame is right now, where they are recruiting at the quarterback position, this puts them much closer to there. And as Ryan said, the margin of error shrinks, or it gives you a bigger margin of error, basically, when you're competing against the elite teams on the schedule. And that's if Notre Dame wants to beat those teams and not just be on the same field with those teams. That's where this is going to make a difference, where they're recruiting right now at the position. Brent says if Brock Purdy doesn't finish this season as a Super Bowl winning quarterback and a top 2 in MVP, I'll drop $100 super chat. Well, Brent, I will be glad to take your money. You don't have to put it in a super chat. You can just send it directly to me via Venmo. I can give you that at the end of the season, because like if you were going to ask me to wager against this, I would put the $100 against this happening, because I think it's like in the last 30 years or something like that, the team that lost the Super Bowl, the New England Patriots, the ones that lost to the Seahawks and then came back the next year, the team that lost the Super Bowl getting back to the Super Bowl the next year, that is something that just historically has not happened in the NFL. So the odds are completely against them. That doesn't mean it can't happen, but the odds against San Francisco even getting back to the Super Bowl, let alone win a Super Bowl this year, vastly against them. So You can just send that directly to me if you want. You don't have to put it in a super chat, but I'll take your money.
I'm curious to see what improvements they make on the offensive line. I think Deebo Samuel is going to be out the door here soon. Ayuk's going to be your number one wide receiver. They just extended Christian McCaffrey and gave him some good guaranteed money. So I'm just kind of curious about how this San Francisco offense is all going to balance out, because I think that they have just a good amount of moving pieces offensively to feel a little bit uncomfortable.
Yeah. Andrew's asking, I assume he's talking about Braden Lindsay. Where is he now? Yeah, he is, as Tommy says, working in a corporate job. The last I heard, he was, I think, going to Indianapolis to take.
So I think Andrew Gilmore's point about asking about Lindsay was saying that was
on the Ian Book hype
top
train,
wide receiver.
basically.
And he's saying that if you gave Ian Book Alabama wide receivers, he obviously would have cooked a little bit differently. While I agree, but he still has to get the ball downfield. And those Alabama wide receivers have to get – they're going to be open downfield. I just don't know if Ian Book's actually going to get them the ball downfield.
Yeah.
You know what Tua did? He let that thing cut, and that's why he was so good. All he did was throw the – not all he did, but he was able to launch that cannon downfield, and he wasn't afraid to do it. Ian Book, you can't say the same.
Who was on the bench behind Tua in 2018? Jalen Hurts was on the bench.
Right.
So, I mean, they had two NFL, and I think Mac Jones was still there. Yeah, Mac Jones was still there at that point as well. So you had three guys who were first-round draft picks on the roster. And if Ian Book had that kind of talent, then it doesn't matter who your wide receiver is. Like, if the quarterback has that kind of talent, he'll get whoever it is the ball in whatever window he needs to get them the ball. And that was not Ian Book. I'm sorry.
I mean, that was Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers turned wide receivers good in Green Bay. He was never given good wide receivers to really work with.
Right. Absolutely. So we're going to start predicting some win totals for some different college teams. Michigan's the defending champ. They've got a season over under of 9.5. You want to go through their schedule one at a time and make the prediction, or do you want me to just rattle off the whole schedule and then make a prediction that way?
We can go game by game.
Okay. Fresno, by the way, they play their first 5 games at Michigan Stadium. Fresno State.
Win.
W?
Yes.
Texas coming to town week 2.
Loss.
That's a big noon kickoff game. I agree. So they're 1-1 so far. Arkansas State.
Win.
Now here's where it gets interesting. Week 4, Big Ten opener, Michigan and USC at the Big House.
I think they win that one. That's my trade-off of Texas. I think they'll beat USC.
I do as well, because USC still has plenty of questions to answer from a defensive standpoint, as we were talking about earlier. Offensive line, plus you've got a new quarterback, obviously. So I will say that is a win as well. So at this point, Michigan is 3-1 heading into week 5 at home against Minnesota.
That's another win.
Okay. So that's 4-1, right?
Yes.
At Washington, week 6.
I think Washington is dropping off severely, so I think Michigan barely squeaks this one out.
I think so as well. I think that this is close. Both teams are obviously going to have new head coaches and new quarterbacks after meeting in the championship game last season. But I think that Michigan overall in better shape as a program. So that puts them at 5-1. Then they go to Illinois the next week. Any reason to think Illinois will knock off the Wolverines?
No.
6-1. Then they host Michigan State.
I think they win that game. I'm real hesitant on that one because I think Michigan State owes them one here soon. And I think they're going to get it when it's least expected. I have Michigan barely winning this game, like barely squeezing this game out. I think it's going to be really close.
Yeah, I think so as well. And Michigan State kind of creeping back into the picture in terms of where that rivalry is now after obviously a couple of down years. So that makes them, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That makes them 7-1 going into a home game against Oregon?
Loss.
I think so as well. I think the Ducks get this. Dan
This is
Lanning
such a
opening.
favorable schedule for them. They have so
I
many
know.
home games in every big game,
USC
except the
and
one in-
Oregon at home. Yeah.
and Texas.
Yeah, that's true. That's absolutely right. So now they are, I keep losing
7-2.
where we are. 7-2 at this point. Okay. 7-2 with 3 games to go. At Indiana, that's a W.
Win.
Northwestern,
It's a win.
that's a W. And then they finish off at Ohio State.
That's a loss.
Yeah, I think the Buckeyes get this as well, and that puts them with a 9-3
So
record.
here's my caveat. I think they are 9-3 is what I feel comfortable with, but I would not be surprised if they blow another Big Ten game between Minnesota, Michigan State, and or maybe Northwestern. But I think they might find a way to lose another one of those Big Ten games.
I think so as well. I would not be shocked. Again, rookie head coach, as good as Sharon Moore did in the relief appearances last season, first-year head coach. I think that we can probably expect some kind of first-year slip-up from Sharon Moore, especially, again, considering all the turnover that they've got after last year, starting at the most important position on the field at quarterback. So, yeah, I think 9-3 is their ceiling, and I wouldn't be shocked if they end up with an 8-4 record either. So definitely under the 9.5 that we started off talking about. Jess, there's a lot swirling around the Caitlyn Clark WNBA situation right now, most of it negative. Do you buy or sell any publicity as good publicity for the WNBA right now?
No, because I don't think you want to start. I don't think you want to start conversations that started to pop up yesterday. So I'm just gonna have to.
I guess
say
that's
no.
true. Like if we're gonna go literally any, then you're right. Some of the stuff that came up yesterday, like that's like. It's just a completely different sort of conversation that started to be had. So any publicity, good public, I think in general, I will say this, WNBA talk is leading national TV and radio shows, right now. And like, do you remember that ever happening before? So from that aspect, it is good publicity for them. Now, again, pushing some of the stuff from yesterday aside, and I'm not going to even attempt to get into it. I'm not going to defend anything, anyone was talking about. But I will say, all these players and former players getting territorial, I guess I get it. The league's been around for almost 30 years at this point, and they're like, hey, we've always been good basketball, and there's always been physical basketball. So don't come tell us how we're supposed to be playing it. I can get sort of the get off my lawn, sort of attitude that some of these players have. But at the same time, the bottom line is whether they like it or not, and whether they want to admit it or not, the Caitlyn Clark phenomena is a thing, right? We've never seen anything like this before. And I don't think we'll probably ever see anything like this ever again, but they just don't know how to handle it right now because it is so unprecedented with everything that we're seeing around Caitlyn Clark. But, there have been plenty of great players who have played in the WNBA before, from Rebecca Lobo to Tamika Catchings, Sue Bird, Diana Taurasi, obviously, Candace Parker, Katie Smith, Lisa Leslie, on and on and on and on. But none of them, and I mean none of them, have brought the level of attention to their game the way Caitlyn Clark has. That's just the way it is. And, like there was never a phenomenon in the college game like we had with Caitlyn Clark and leading Iowa to back-to-back national championship games, and what I don't think we need to hear is Angel Reese out here. Angel Reese is like, well, saying she's also the reason that people are watching women's basketball right now. Just, not just Caitlyn Clark. And I mean, basically saying that she just gives herself away. She's admitting what all these players don't want to admit.
Yeah, they're jealous.
That there's a huge level of pettiness and jealousy to this, right?
Right.
And I mean, that's like, again, Angel Reese just giving herself away. And, like, look at the attendance for any Caitlyn Clark game, as well as the TV ratings. They say the complete opposite of what Angel Reese is trying to say, because more than twice as many people are going to a Caitlyn Clark game as the other games in the league right now. The bottom line with this whole thing, about the whole physical play and everything else, some of Clark's teammates just have to step up. Like that's someone on that roster has to step up. There was an Irish forward back in the day named Crystal Irwin, and she played with Sherelle Allen, among other players back then. And I guarantee you this, if Sherelle Allen was getting bounced around the way Caitlyn Clark is getting bounced around right now, Crystal Irwin wasn't going to be having any of that. Crystal Irwin, and I should say the late Crystal Irwin, rest her soul, she would not be standing for that. And someone on Caitlyn Clark's team has to finally step up and say, we're not going to take that. She's our teammate and we've got her back. And it's just not going to happen this way. Like that's what's going to put an end to all this. And unfortunately, we just haven't seen that happen so far.
Yeah. So I think ultimately it comes down to jealousy between, current, former, new WNBA players. But to me, you can't cry wolf, because all you've been doing is complaining about how you're not treated equally. And then finally, there is some life interjected or ejected or interjected, or what's the word? Ejected. No, because that means you're getting taken out.
Rewind this. What are you trying to say?
No, I'm trying to say that these players can't be upset because they've complained in the past about how they aren't treated equally. And Caitlyn Clark has now entered the league and allowed you to be treated more equally, right? So it's, which way do you want it? Do you not want Caitlyn Clark, or do you want to go back to no chartered flights? Do you want to go to less pay? Do you want to go to, less ticket sales, etc.? And so there's a trade-off, right? And so I get it, the frustration, and it's not just Caitlyn Clark, but Caitlyn Clark is what has brought attention to your sport right now. So I do believe there has to be some sort of appreciation.
Right. Exactly right. And, it's just insane how, like, around every corner, this stuff has continued to happen. It started toward the end of the tournament, the Final Four, with, Taurasi, with her caddy stuff and
well, it started before she even came into the league, and that's right. The disappointing part is you teed
and again,
up
that's what gives
else.
them away. They can talk about this as a physical league, and we're always going to be physical with rookies, and it's like 95 feet up the floor. Like, you've always been like that. It's like, I don't know, man. She's getting the Caitlyn Clark treatment right now. And, to her credit, she's not the one out there complaining about it. She just, she might be trash talking out there on the court and everything else, but you haven't heard her, at least in the media. She's not complaining, and whining about, she needs to start getting these calls and stuff like that, but someone's got to be the enforcer. Like, and like, if I'm the Fever, I would just find someone who, sign them off the street to come in and be your enforcer. Someone's got to do it. It's like Caitlyn Clark is the future of the league, whether you like it or not, if you're playing in that league right now. That's just the way it is. All right, we will wrap it up with that. A lot of great stuff. Thanks to RJ Abeytia from USCFootball.com, who came in and talked a little USC football with us at the start. Ryan Roberts, and of course, Jesse as well. Thanks for being here today. We will wrap it up. I think Vincenzo is going to be in tomorrow. Jesse will be back on Thursday's show for a little wee in, wee out, as well as we roll on through this grinding old week here on IB Nation Sports Talk. Jess, I will talk to you later. Hit the like button before you leave. We do appreciate it, and we will talk to you mañana on IB Nation Sports Talk.